In my old age, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, because I never thought that something I just love as a hobby could become a career. When I was young, believe it or not, I played every single sport except football and rugby. And I mean every. I'm an excellent swimmer, if I should say so myself. I play all racket games. I played basketball, volleyball, you name it, I played it, except football and rugby. Even hockey, till I got a very serious injury that was in Form 1 and I dropped it. So I've always loved sport. My parents were golfers, they were racket game, they played tennis, they played squash. They couldn't swim to save their lives, but yeah. So generally, everyone in we were a sporty family, but I didn't think it could be a career. Believe it or not, when I started out as a journalist, first I did social stories. That was on Africa Journal. I don't know if it still shows. It was a Reuters program. That's basically more or less where I started. And then I was a business journalist at Reuters. Yes, I can actually cover for you business news if you want. Then I did politics at Reuters. Covered civil war because we were covering East and Central Africa. Also, I worked at the BBC for a while, covering East and Central Africa. That was mostly political news, genocides, refugees, famine in Sudan. So that was my background until I joined Radio Africa. And when I joined Radio Africa, it was as a news person, not as a sports person. And early this century, we were cutting costs and we were suddenly told, okay, the newsreader also needs to do sports. And I said, oh, that's fine with me because I watch the games on the weekend anyway. And so I started doing the sports news as well and realized I loved it. And a few years later, when we wanted to do a Saturday afternoon sports show, I was actually approached by Caroline Mutoka and she said, why don't you do that show? Do it with Maina. No, before she told me to do it, I was sitting in for Maina when Maina Kageni was starting the show. And he was away for his first show and he was supposed to do it with Jimmy Gathu playing the music. If you know anything about Jimmy Gathu, he knows nothing about sport. Sorry, Jimmy, but he doesn't, it's not his thing. So I was told, okay, Radul, sit in with Jimmy, do the sports side while Jimmy does the music. And I sat in with Jimmy for 2 weeks because Maina was not there for the first 2 weeks of his own show. And by the time he came back, the program controller was like, hey, Radul, but you're doing it so well, do it with Maina. So we took over, Maina and I. And then 2 years later, Maina was like, my Saturdays are a bit busy. That's when Caroline told me, take over the show. You can. And I was like, can I? And I said, okay, I can. And I did. And created a new team, which became me, Roy and Kiani. And it was just Saturday afternoons bantering about sport. And at the time, it was only English Premier League because those were the instructions from above. That's all Kenyans care about. Let's give them what they care about, which is English Premier League. And we'd actually have no show between May and August when the season was out. And then after a few years, I was like, but surely Kenya has a league of their own. You can't tell me there's no sport in Kenya. And I did my investigation and found out that there were games on the weekend. And I went to Nyayo Stadium to watch a game. Shamefully called all my friends who I watch Premier League with. They didn't want to go to Nyayo Stadium. I managed to find one guy who was an official of Coast Stars and said, yeah, I'll come with you. And I went and I watched the game, and that's when I realized, okay, this is not what I see on TV. Why? So that's when I began to ask questions. This is around 2007, 2008. That's when I began to ask questions that when I watch Premier League, it's all flashy, the stadium is full, everything is in order, the players are paid well. Why are things different? And that was the first time I started a mini version of Jazza Study. And I went to work the next morning and I gave Kenyan Premier League news on the radio, and the Twitter, those days was only text, shortcode, started buzzing like, Radul went where? To do what? How? Nyayo Stadium, wasn't it scary? Isn't it insecure? And people were asking all these questions that, what the hell is going on? Radul Kenya has a Premier League, it was just, so Caroline was like, are you going back next week? I said, of course, I had so much fun, I'm going back on Sunday. And she said, can I come? I'm like, yes, come. So that time we had Jalango and Larry on the breakfast show with her, and she said, you guys are coming with us, And we started this movement where every Sunday morning, Radul will text everybody in her phone, and from the beginning, 5 people turned up, then 10, then 15, then 20. All of a sudden, we were this big group of people who started going to watch Kenyan Premier League matches. And that's when I said, okay, things need to change, because that's when you start to ask questions. Things are very different to what I see on TV. Why? and what can we do about it. So we started a movement called Kids for Football that Coca-Cola sponsored for some time, and it kicked off from there. And that was 12 years ago, and it's just grown to, okay, Radul, you only talk about football. Okay, I'll talk about rugby as well. Ah, Radul, you leave out hockey. Oh, you leave out this. So suddenly I think I've started to cover all sports. You know, Kenya has representatives in archery in the Olympics, and we have this young lady who does winter sports skiing. I've interviewed her as well. And then you begin to realize that, you know, once you have the information, you want to do something about it. I'm not sure how big of a sports fan you are, but I'm sure after this interview, you're going to ask yourself questions. When I started, I actually had none to look up to in Kenya. None. Not even in Africa, because I joined Supersport before Carol Shabalala. So I had nobody to look up to when I was becoming a sports journalist. Or rather, when I was becoming an active sports fan. Let me rephrase. But there have been many who've come through the ranks. I'm proud to say some have come through my hands, like Ida Waringa. I was a person who she won a competition on my Facebook page, and when she came to pick her prize, we had a conversation. I was like, okay, this girl knows about her sport and she has a good voice. And then she told me, I want to be on radio. And we were fortunate enough that there was a freelance spot available. She would come in and out every time one of the presenters was away. And then when we were starting Bamba Sport, which unfortunately didn't work, she was one of the first people I called, and she managed to get her experience there. Mukami Wambora, almost same thing, though she started on Capital Breakfast with James Wakabi, who had worked with at Supersport. And when we were looking for presenters for Bamba Sport, I'm like, I know this girl from Embu. In fact, she was my niece, yes. So Mukami joined the team as well. Michelle Katami, I'm sure you know or you heard of her. She works at the BBC right now. She was a writer, a blogger for sports. And when we were starting Radio Jambo, we had hired, it was a Holy Sports station, and we had hired almost all the staff, and we needed one position. And I said, I'm giving this to a woman. You know, I try not to be biased, but I'm sorry. We have a whole, you can't tell me there's no woman out here who can't be a sports producer. And I looked through all the CVs, I found Michelle Katami, and she was very aggressive, her writing was very good, and she came on board. She left, she went to Supersport, she's now at the BBC. So I'm proud to say some of these female journalists have passed through my hands, but there's still so many out there which do an excellent job right now. I mean, there are many, but there could be more. There's still more men. If there's someone watching who wants to be a sports journalist, first and foremost, know your stuff, because you will be criticized twice as much. You'll be judged harshly, at least in the beginning. I was judged harshly in the beginning. Like, what does she know? Till they realize, okay, she actually knows what she's talking about. So know your sport. Whatever sport you choose to cover, know your sport. And then you must be passionate about it. Don't force it. If you're not passionate, if you don't go seeking the sports news and sports information, don't do it, because it has to come. Sport is one of those things, either you love it or you don't. You can't force it, you know. And if you love it and you want to do it, read a lot, watch a lot of sport. Most sport is so easy to understand the scores if you watch it once or twice. And right now, if I was growing up now, I think things would be easier for me now than it was 10 years ago, because of the online, what online brings, what it allows you to do. And right now, there's scarcity of jobs. I'm sure even at KTN, people want to be reporters, but the jobs are just not there. I tell people, take advantage of social media. It's free. Get your social media handles in order, and then work on your content. Give fixtures, results, give your own analysis, do your own interviews. There's Facebook Live, there's Instagram Live. Make use of those, and if you're consistent, people will begin to follow you slowly by slowly. I keep telling people, fine, maybe you may tag me when you do this stuff, so that if you need me to share the link to your story or the link to your video, I'll do it, you know, to lend a helping hand. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have the numbers on social media, so I will share your stuff on my Facebook page. I'll share it on Twitter. I'll try and help your show be watched as well. YouTube, use YouTube to make your own videos around sport, because the jobs are not available, but you can do something on social media. And if you're consistent enough, if there's anything we've seen from Instagram, you don't have to have been on radio, you don't have to have been on TV to become big in that industry, just be consistent. Be consistent, know your stuff. And if you have parents who are able, tell them to buy you a good camera, you know. Get a good camera, go out there, cover the sports news, go online, information is there, do your analysis online, and just try and build yourself as you seek a job. But the jobs are not there. That is the sad thing. But social media is there. You know, right now, and I probably shouldn't say this because of KRA, I have so many clients on social media, you know. Don't come for me. I pay my taxes. But yeah, so you can actually make money on those platforms if you build your content enough. Work on your content. Continuously work on your content. When I was starting out, there was no social media. Either you get a job or you sit at home. So yeah, take advantage of all those platforms. The biggest lesson I've learned, I don't know if it's the biggest lesson, but one thing I have learned is that it's actually not as hard as you think it is. Yeah. People always ask me, as a female journalist, I probably in my time, apart from the first year where people doubted me because they probably had not heard a woman doing sport on the radio, after that I've actually had it pretty easy and probably had it easier than the guys. Maina Kageni has a word for it. He says sympathy votes. He said, Radul, you got sympathy votes because you're a woman. So people are like, a woman who knows sport. You know. So I'm not saying it's easy. It's hard work for anybody, male or female. But it's not as hard as people say it is just because you're a woman. You just need to take that bold step. You know, just take the bold step and do the work. It's not easy. It's not easy, but don't be put off because you're a woman. Use your womanhood. I don't mean, don't abuse your values. Don't go against your values, but use whatever advantage you can get. When I started on my radio show, I was with Maina and a guy called Muniu, both Manu fans, both very aggressive. I was an Arsenal fan. I got sympathy votes and I used it to build my social media platform. You know, they're like, hey, you guys are so hard on that chick. You know, chin up. Hey, if it works for me, use it, you know. But don't get me wrong. Everything is hard work, but it's not as hard as you think it is, which is probably one of the lessons I learned. But work hard. Those are two different things. Don't be put off, but work hard.